during the recording thing. It's great.
I know. Okay, so let me just escape that and now reshare. All right.
Boom. All right.
So far, good. Look at me. I'm a technological wonder today.
Yeah, you're really on. I mean,
let me tell you. All right. So here is the plan for today. We're going to do our review, and then we're going to talk more about staffing and the importance of staffing. So I'm going to let Mike take it away and go from there.
All right. Okay. So yeah, last week we talked about staffing and building our staffing plans and just general considerations about that. So some of the points that we sort of covered there were we talked about the people make attractions, right? So it's obviously you can have the best stuff and the coolest attractions and rides or whatever things are going on, but in the end it's the people that you hire and the people that run the attraction that are going to be the critical part about making that a good experience and something that's going to be successful. So and so we talked about how to consider how you're going to hire how many people, all those kinds of things. And we talked about some of the considerations about part-time, full-time, seasonal, what sort of qualifications they would need, any other essential skills or quality. Talked about the recruitment plan, about how you're going to go and tackle that. So we talked about job fairs or one-on-one hires or those different things, and where in the sort of in the life cycle of your attraction that those might make sense. So where if you're in need of large amount of people to start up your season, then maybe a job fair is your best bet. Or if it's an in-season thing, then you're going to do sort of a smaller hire, right, where one-on-one or sort of hiring referrals and things like that. We looked at dot plans. So remember back to that, there were, we sort of took a map or a sort of drawing of an attraction, or, we had those examples of the water slides or the Pan Am Park, and how we sort of made those dot plans using little dots to sort of position our people so that we could sort of visually map that out and understand our needs, and in terms of where are we going to put these staff and what are their roles, and just to get an idea of what that number looked like, right? And then we looked at sort of a typical organization of a amusement park, and we looked at how it was useful for that in those settings, because you have these large volumes of staff, and some of them are into the hundreds or thousands, that to break them into smaller operating units, and that sort of helped your supervisory team, and it sort of organizationally, you get from very big departments down to these very small operating units where people can have sort of better control over what's going on, and just ease of sort of administration. I'd say you can imagine building a schedule for 1,000 people would be a nightmare, but building a schedule for 20 or 30 is a manageable task. So we went with that. And then we started in on talking about culture, and today we're going to continue that conversation, and then segue into sort of training and development. So, any questions or comments from last week that anybody had that we should want to talk about before we jump in?
Yeah, was there any aha moments or what the heck are you talking about moments? Because actually they could both be one and the same. Knowing our teaching style.
No.
Okay. Well,
second. So, all right, that's good. But yeah, if you think of anything, or if there were any things that really stood out, then let us know. So this week we're going to talk about culture a little more, and what that means, and sort of how attractions and generally any company goes about sort of developing their culture, and why that's important, and what the spillover effects of those kinds of things are. So we start with a little bit of a definition, and then we'll kind of move into sort of some examples. I think Chuck's got some stuff that he's going to share, and then we'll roll through that. So without going verbatim, I mean, it talks about, what is the culture? Well, it's that collection of values and expectations, practices. So it's really the the values of your organization, your attraction. And so when we talked last week, we talked about those big organizations like Disney, where it's pretty easy to figure out what their culture is, right? Because they live it and everybody kind of knows what that's all about, right? It's pretty universal. It's practiced from like top to bottom in their organization. And anyone who has had any encounter with Disney, which is about 98% of North America, it knows exactly what they're getting out of that, right? In terms of what their sort of their product looks like and feels like, what their staff are like, all those kinds of things. And so they're sort of the gold standard, we'd say, in terms of the attractions industry of if you were going to start any type of attraction or park or whatever, that you're probably going to look at Disney at some level as a model, right, in terms of what you want to be. And the secret about it is that you don't need to be a Disney-sized organization to provide that level of service or to have that sort of culture embedded in your organization. You could be an attraction of 2 people and and still be able to take lessons and sort of put that together. So I thought one of the things, Chuck, you're going to share your screen, is talk about how something like Glow Zone 360, which is obviously something that Chuck is an owner of, but obviously is not in the Disney category of attractions.
Oh, come on, Mike, what are you talking about?
I said scale, I didn't say quality. I mean, it's definitely you're the Disney of glow in the dark and mini golf and laser tag in the in the Toronto area. So but so Chuck, why don't you sort of walk through some of the stuff that you have and just show how that sort of came about.
Am I sharing my Glow Zone thing here?
That's right. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. All right. So
there's a link to buffalo chicken dip on your bookmark. So if everybody wants that recipe, you can share it out.
One of my superpowers is appetizers, folks. Let me tell you, I make some mean appetizers. So
if anyone needs a good recipe, Brittany, maybe you need some buffalo chicken dip for the tailgate.
That's true. That's true. I'll send the link. So what I've done is I've pulled up our reviews, because one of the things that that we try to pride ourselves on is creating a very, very fun culture where people get a good experience. And it really there's really no difference between our laser tag and mini golf and arcade versus a putting edge. In fact, if you were to compare the actual courses, our mini golf is not near as elaborate as a putting edge, because we have the other 2 attractions. But what sets us apart is, I think, is in a lot of cases is the culture and the ambiance and what you're going to expect when you get here. So I was just going through some of these reviews. Fun for the whole family. We always reply. This one is 5 stars. Helpful staff. We like to see those. We get those quite a bit as we're going through. People are there for the staff was helpful. The staff is what's making the difference, and we work really, really hard to make sure that the staff experience is like the experience they get from the staff is excellent. I'm actually going to switch because I got a bad one just this week, so I want to just talk about it, and then I'm going to talk about what we did about it. Let me just switch locations and reviews. All right, so we got another. Then this one here, they loved everything. The staff needs to be more professional and more friendly. You're working at arcade game. It's a good point. It's not rocket science. All you need to do is make sure they have a good time and be interested in what they're doing. So I very quickly responded. I said, we've posted this review. We have sent out communication to all of our staff at both locations about this review, and I'm waiting for him to email me back to find out what day they were working. And it's not like we're going to go and fire whoever it was, but we're going to show them that what they do and how they interact makes an experience that much better. Like, the staff is the most important thing at an attraction. You look at the day before. So I work just to help out because we were closed for such a long time. And we're about $1 million more in debt than we were before COVID. I worked there on Wednesday night. So, finish my day here and go and work there. Well, this was from last Wednesday night because I recognized her. So they were in, and I kicked her butt at air hockey, like just decimated her. It was awesome. Just, not to toot my own horn. And I hear the peanut gallery behind me. But that experience had her write a great review. And I told her she can beat me next time. Epic fun, so much fun, right? So this very clean staff were great. So we aren't a Disney, but like a Disney. So even if you think what you to expect when you go to Disney, you still get blown away. And Mike and I, we went on a Disney cruise with our families and some of our other friends, our travel group, 10 years ago now, the first one that we went on.
Yeah.
And we work in the industry, and we also knew that Disney was the gold standard, or is the gold standard. And I was still completely blown away by it was more than I expected. Like, it's in a different realm when it comes to the service, the attention to detail. You ask any staff member, from the person who's picking up trash or the birds, that's a great story, on the deck, all the way to the ship captain. They're all accessible and are so friendly and will make you feel like you're the only person that matters when you're talking to them. So in our little attraction, that's the same level that we're trying to instill in our staff to provide the guests who come in. During March break, which is our very, very busiest time, I take a week's holiday from my full-time job, and I go and I work at Glowzone. And my entire job, I am never behind the counter. My entire job that week is to be out with the people that are there, because it's so busy, to make sure everyone knows that we've seen them, we're going to get them in. It's organized chaos, but don't worry, we've got a plan. And it just keeps everyone's stress level, because there's nothing worse than waiting in line and having no idea what's going on. Is this line ever going to move? But boy, if someone comes up and says, "Oh, okay, I've got 3 ahead of you, you're next, don't you worry, we've seen you," it makes all the difference in the world. So I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to the presentation here. Anyway, so that's my little that's my little takeaway about how important the staff are, and how even a little guy like us can build a really solid culture. And those reviews mean a lot. Like, if thousands of reviews and we have a 4.3 or 4.2 rating, it actually can bring in more guests, right? So any comments about that or questions? You can type them in. You guys know you can type them in anytime into the chat box. Nope. Okay.
So yeah, I think we're gonna. That's all right. That you just gave away what we're gonna do now.
That's right.
So I think as we kind of go from there, as opposed to kind of I think this is a good time for us to kind of just do some free thinking here about how does an attraction, or a possible attraction, start to think about these topics and how to build that culture. As Chuck said, and like we mentioned, you don't need to be the Disneys. You don't need that sort of bankroll to be able to pull that off. And there are just things that you need to do, or I'll say ideas or concepts or things that you should have in place that help you towards building that culture and deciding what it is that you want to do. For example, when we were building Wet and Wild, we had very conscious decisions about what kind of, like, we knew we were a water park. We could go about it a bunch of different ways. We immediately at the beginning decided that we were going to be very family in our approach. So what did that mean for us? And so everything that we did, starting from the beginning and all the way to the day that we opened, we always kind of drew back to the idea that we were going to be a family experience. And so that had everything to do with, selection of product that we were going to do, from the rides to the food to the merchandise to the music that we play in the park to our message and branding, and how we sort of dealt with our staff training. And that sort of inspired our culture. Some of it was because we wanted to turn the page on, that was a water park that was built on the bones of an old water park. I'm sure everybody, some of you remember Wild Water Kingdom, and that was definitely something where we they did a lot of things like all night parties and EDM concerts and all that kind of stuff like that, which is fine if that's your business. For us, we decided that wasn't what we wanted to do, right? So we had to sort of separate ourselves out from that type of programming. So but yeah, so in the Padlet, we're starting to put some examples or things up that how we build a great staff culture, right? So and we seeded it there, sort of having a clear mission and values was one. Yeah. So management that leads by example, right? So the management needs to know, like, or set the tone, right? So walk the talk, right? Ethics, so good business ethics. So that sort of talks about how from top to bottom, right? Are you going to are you in it just to sort of soak money out of the pockets of your clientele, or are you actually there to do, to provide that? Because I think, obviously you're there to make money, but it's how you do it, I guess, that's important, right?
Well, or things as simple as are they telling the admission staff to not ring through every fifth transaction, so that it can be under the table things? Well, guess what? If you do that as management, the staff are going to feel like, oh, well, I can skim from the take. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's a completely different thing. So you look at Glow Zone. If I'm in there by myself, yeah, I'll grab a coffee. But if there's a staff member there, I'll pay for the coffee, with the staff discount, because that is setting the tone.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I think ethics was a really good one. I
very good, I think.
Yeah.
Staff appreciation. So yeah, appreciation days, employee of the month, rewards, etc. So yeah, really, you have to sort of, show if you're gonna sort of ask those things of your staff, then you need to be able to reward the staff for those efforts, right? And there's multiple ways in doing that, right? And it depends on who your staff are. Sometimes, when I'm dealing with if you're dealing with younger staff, then there are things that the staff like that, maybe a sort of more senior staff would not. At the Pan Am Games, it was an interesting example because, as I said, 90% of the staff there were volunteers. And so in order to get them to perform, their incentive was not to get paid. They weren't getting paid. They were actually showing up and working 6 to 8 hours in the summertime outdoors, usually for nothing. And so some of the things we had to consider is, okay, well, what are they getting out of this experience? And some of it was, access to the games. So, getting to get really close to the events or the athletes or things like that. We gave away a lot of swag, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but it's just like free stuff, right? Stuff with the logo or brand on it. There was a program that was really popular, and they do it at the Olympics too, where when the volunteers show up in the morning, they have to check in at like a volunteer desk so that, they know that you're supposed to be there, because you're not supposed to just wander in on a day that you're not assigned and all those kinds of things. So you check in. They give you your vouchers because we feed them, so they would get their vouchers for the meals. So there was rules about if you're there for so long, you get so many meals and that kind of stuff. And then they would usually get, like, it was kind of like the gift of the day, but it was a pin, like those those metal lapel pins or whatever, and they were usually sponsored by someone like Chevrolet or you know big companies, like Hudson's Bay Company or Roots or somebody like that, and it had a logo and a thing, and the hook to it was that all of the athletes also have pins for their like delegation or their sport federation. So it became a way in which the volunteers and athletes and other delegates and people in the games could swap these things, and the volunteers loved it, and they could wear the pins on their uniform, and they would sort of collect those. And I have a bunch too from that, and that was the big thing. So
What was that movie, Mike, where the wait staff had all the pins and lost their
that was Office Space. Yeah,
Office Space lost their mind.
That's right. That was that was the pieces of flair, right? Yeah,
The flair, yes.
This was a little bit more organic than that. You weren't required to do it.
I know.
They just loved it. They loved it.
Trish has, I think it's here. I wish I could see it right here. She has the like a one of those picture frames that's deep, and she's got all sorts of the different country pins in there that were switched for the medical teams. So like she worked medical at the Pan Am. She organized it, that part of it with Mike, and all the different medical staff would come in and they all switch pins. So she's got all these cool pins as well, and has put it up along with her. And it's it was a sense of pride, right? She's got it with her ID badge that allowed her to go into all of the different games and do different things. At Glowzone, what we do is we do now that movies are opened up, we'll do it again. We do a pass swap with Cineplex. So we'll give them, hundreds of free passes, and they will give us the equal value of movie passes. And when we see our staff doing good things, we'll give them a couple of movie passes. And we have birthday party evaluation sheets. And the people who are at the top of that will get a 4-pass of evaluation sheets and things like that.
Yeah, ticket trade in the industry is huge.
Yeah.
So even I was doing ticket trades with like everybody and anybody. Wonderland and I were doing ticket trades. I knew some people at the Toronto Blue Jays, those kinds of things. So yeah, it was kind of value for value, right? Because then you have these, and it doesn't cost you anything because you're giving tickets for your attraction, and you're trading them to another attraction. And like I said, attractions industry is very competitive on the surface, but when you get beyond that, everybody really just wants to help each other out, because a strong industry it benefits everybody. But we have a lot of stuff here talking about inclusiveness too, trust, accountability, safe environment. And those are super important. And that's not specific to the attractions industry. That's any industry, right? About making the workplace a safe and equitable place for everybody to work in, right? And I think definitely when you look at I think the work world now is post-pandemic too, you're seeing these things come out too about where people are being more selective about the places that they want to work, especially when you're in the service sector. And the service sector right now is having a lot of challenges about staffing and hiring and sort of rebuilding, because some people have moved on and done all these other things. And the businesses that will recover faster are the ones that have a reputation for taking care of their staff, and whether that's in pay, incentives, and just generally the work environment that they work in. And I think that's going to that I think will spill over for a long time, where people are they're less inclined to kind of stick with something that's not working for them, and they're going to move on to something else. So and especially when you're looking at seasonal businesses, like somewhere like Canada's Wonderland or Wet and Wild, or those places where you kind of rely, or you hope that from year to year that you're going to get a certain percentage of your staff return from season to season, because those are the people that help you train the new people. The first year is always the hardest. When we opened, when we started Wet and Wild, nobody that we hired from like supervisors on down had any knowledge of the park at all. So we had to train them on everything. Year 2 was a lot easier, because half the staff had already worked at the park. So they were the veterans, and they were the ones where you could have them lead smaller teams and say, okay, this is how we do things, or those kinds of things. So, and a lot of that was about, did they have a good experience last summer, right? So, yeah, collaboration and inclusiveness. Everybody has a stake in the success of the organization. So, even from the frontline staff, all the way up, that everybody's accountable, and they're, when things are going well, then, everybody, sort of reaps the benefit of that, as opposed to, those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, I'm just starting to bunch of put some together that makes sense. And Brittany, with these ones, if you can involve staff in the company process and decision making, you're creating trust. People can feel accountable and understand the goals, which then and then you communicate that all the way up and down the chain. And those are three great things that makes it accessible to all staff and actually helps create that culture. If all management teams at attractions ran their training kind of like we're doing this course, where we're asking for your input. What do you think? Like, how many times so far, we're only halfway through this. How many times have we said, man, we hadn't even thought of that. What a great idea, right? Just from these Padlets and other things. Well, it's making us, it's going to make for a better second time we do this. But I think it also, we've got any given week, most of you on the call, most of you are interacting with us, which makes us feel like, yeah, you're engaged in this process with us. So, if you take what we're doing here, which basically is kind of like a staff training, just a very long, boring staff training. Sorry. if you take how we're doing this and you extrapolate that across to a business, I would be very comfortable knowing that if you were in staff instead of students, that you're going to be able to walk the walk, talk the talk, and be amazing ambassadors for the organization. And really, if you can think of your staff not as staff, but as ambassadors for the culture that you're trying to do or trying to portray, chances are, that's what's going to happen. We always let our staff know, and this is at Central Counties Tourism, at Glow Zone, that they are responsible, but we as the senior team or the owners, or me as the executive director at Central Counties, I'm accountable. And I say, I will never, ever throw you under the bus for making a wrong decision, because you actually took the time and felt comfortable enough making a decision. So, and 90% of the time, the decisions you're making help the customer out and make it so we get good reviews. And that 10% of the time where it goes sideways, we'll dissect it and we'll communicate it out to everybody so that it doesn't happen again. But it has nothing to do with, we certainly want you to never feel you can't make a decision again, because organizations, the one thing that drives me nuts anywhere when you're talking to someone is, I got to check with my manager. No, you don't. You know the business. You make the decision. Then tell your manager what you did. So, sorry, I'm going down a rabbit hole, Mike. I'll
You're very passionate about that.
I am very passionate about making sure that the staff are empowered. And this is, and you guys have it here, right? You've got set expectations to follow the protocols. Well, if there aren't any protocols, if you haven't given those, here's the parameters of which you can operate, and if staff don't know the culture, don't understand, they can't do this. They can't make those decisions. So you put it all together, and suddenly you do have a fantastic culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think to end off this sort of conversation, and we'll sort of dive into how we sort of build those sort of protocols and set expectations and communicate them, and that's what we call training. Is one of the the attractions industry is by and large an industry about fun. And so one of the key slogans that we had a program at Wet and Wild, it was called 5 Star, and there was a bunch of stuff about service recovery and everything. But the end sort of sentence of it was, have fun and be fun, was basically what we told the staff every day.
Yeah.
And that meant, you know, you are, as a team member, as a member of an attraction, as a staff member, you are part of the attraction. You are not, you're not separate from it. You are an integral part of it. And so in order for it to meet the expectations of the people coming to it, then, the staff have to be, a living embodiment of what you're trying to build. And it was a water park, so let's act like we're, like it's a fun place. So be fun, be authentically yourself. So interact, be spontaneous, do those different kinds of things. And that goes a long way about just sort of building up what the culture is, right? So our culture at the water park was, we were going to be a family attraction, but we were going to be about fun. So we were going to make things fun. It wasn't, nobody came to a water park expecting things not to be fun, so we were always looking, at our processes and things to make sure that, that fun was in the equation somewhere. It's not always the top thing, because sometimes, things like safety, which is super boring, but important, it had to be, at the top of the mind, right? But, fun was always in the conversation. So, all right.
And sorry, and what we tell our staff, and I think we're not alone in this. People coming to Glow Zone, it's not real life, right? You're coming to escape real life, right? You're coming just to have an hour or two, or if you go to Disney for a week, you are going to just get away from whatever else is all of those other things that are pulling you in a million directions. You are coming to have, like Mike said, to have fun. And we let them know right in the interview process that our expectation is that regardless of, and I think I might have mentioned this in the course, because, or if not, it was because I just did some interviews. It doesn't matter what kind of crap day you had, right? It doesn't matter if you got yelled at by your parents, or you broke up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or when you come to work, you have to be. It's not real life. You need to be an actor. You have to get out of your shell and give that over the top thing. Different like I have no issue challenging people, random guests, to a game of air hockey, and creating excitement in there. For some people, if that isn't your personality, it's difficult for them to do that. And I'm not expecting that they do, but I do expect that they are greeting the guests in a friendly manner, having some interaction, asking what's going on and that sort of stuff. Yes, Naf.
But wouldn't it be important? Like, we didn't include, for example, respect for emotional and mental health. I mean, those comes under the emotional health. Like breaking up with I know. I mean, the work won't stop, but I mean, wouldn't be like, for example, if somebody passed away, I mean, there should be some kind of consultation, some kind of
yeah, absolutely.
To be done, right?
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that if you don't feel you can make it in because of whatever's happening in your life, like if you can't come in and do that, we do have staff that will you take the day off, and that's just fine. Keeping in mind that I'm looking at a bunch of part-timers. It's very easy to switch up their shifts and that sort of stuff. And we are, every single week, our staff provide their hours that they're able to work, and then we base it on that. So we understand that, especially on the part-timers list, that schedules can change quickly, and if they can't find someone to work for them on that shift, or they say, hey, my dog died or something like that, we as the owners will find them a replacement. We'll say, don't worry about it, we'll take care of it. So yes, I'm not saying work is the end all be all. What we're saying is if you're coming to work, you have to put all your baggage at the door and be at work, right?
Yeah, I understand now. I understand the
Yeah.
point. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
now
no,
I
no,
understand.
no worries, no worries. Yeah, I still want to. No, I'm sorry, you busted your leg. Get your butt in here. No, that's not what. We're not that mean, but I got your point too. Yes, we and you know what I do think to that point, Knopf, if you've created a fantastic welcoming culture at your attraction, then work can actually be therapeutic. In not therapeutic, but you know what I mean. Like there are people who get up in the morning and are stressed beyond belief or anxious beyond belief because, oh my goodness, I have to go to work. Oh God, I got to go back there today. That is not conducive to creating a winning culture, not at all. And there are some attractions and others in the tourism industry where that's where they're at, and they need to change that, because that isn't good on mental health. And that one person who is feeling that way, it's amazing how quickly that can spread like a virus across all of the staff. So if you've got a lot of these things that are on this Padlet here as part of that culture, the staff are looking forward to coming into work, right? And are having a good time, and it becomes part of their social or part of their lives in a very positive way. And management needs to look out for that. And I can tell you, we have um, we have gotten rid of, over the years, we call them the cancers. There have been staff that they get in there, and got to remember, these are all first time jobbers, 14 to 17 years old, 15 to 7, 14 sometimes. And sometimes you get someone who, someone starts dating a guy that they like, or someone, or whatever it is. And it's as soon as we see a crack in that cohesiveness, we get to the bottom of it. And if it can't be trained out of them, then someone goes. And we always start with corrective action, but we will not tolerate having a divided staff. That's not what an attraction is about, because you can feel it. Suddenly you're working. Oh, I don't want to work today because Bob's working. And we can't have that. We want everyone to get along. So, and I'm sure that, Mike, you've probably got stories about that too from your days.
So many. But yeah, I think, to end on that comment, I think, it just starts back with, every attraction needs to know who they are, right? And what they're going to do. And that message needs to go all the way through everything that you do. And, and that sort of informs your culture. And so if you're a, agribusiness, or you're a zoo, or you're a festival or an amusement park or whatever, that, once you've settled on what you are, then you need to sort of build in that organizational culture that generates, the sort of, vibe that you want your guests to feel. And that, starts with your staff and how you, obviously you treat them, but also how you train them. So, all right, let's jump into our PowerPoint now.
Yeah, no, I just got to figure out what the heck's going on here. Let's
You're
see
on such a roll with technology.
I know. Today. I was doing well. Let's see if I can do well again here. Let's show.
All right.
Sucker out. And
yeah, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, well, let's see what happens when I do. Did it work?
It did work. Very good. Oh
my goodness, that's it. I'm tapping out.
Oh well,
I can't have.
It gets more difficult for you.
I was gonna say I can't have a full winning day. There's no way.
That's right. Well, there's a laser show at the end of this, so. So, all right. So training, and that's the look at that segue, right? As we just dropped right into. So the quote up here, and this is something that I've used in supervisor and manager training for years. This quote, and this is: the most important job of a manager is to train and develop people. And it holds true wherever you go, but in the attractions industry, this is very, very valid in terms of, there are a lot of jobs and hats that you need to wear as a manager or an operator of an attraction, whether you're the owner or, you're in some sort of corporate hierarchy, that your number one job in this industry is to train and develop people. For the most part, your staff are going to be, like Chuck said, they're going to be young, or they're going to be inexperienced, or they're not trained in that. I mean, nobody goes to school to learn how to be a ride operator or a mini golf course marshal, or a I don't know, pumpkin patch person or something. There isn't, like, no one's going to walk up to you and go, well, I have 10 years of experience in doing this. It's just never going to happen. So you're going to be hiring, like we talked before, we're going to be hiring for their personal qualities, and we're going to, train for skill. So we're going to have to bake that in, because, and so, so that, that becomes, if you understand, as somebody who's, in a senior position in an attraction, that your chief job is to develop and train the people that are working the attraction, then that sort of, helps guide what you're going to do throughout your daily life. And, put here, obviously that, we talked about that, the quality and performance of your staff are everything in the, you can build that $30 million roller coaster and people will ride it and think it's great. But if every time they show up, the operators are, slow, or they're inattentive or anything else like that, it really diminishes that experience, and you're probably not going to do it more than once. So, all right. So what are the benefits of a well-trained staff? And, we've talked about some of it, but, obviously safety. So if you're operating in any, thing that involves, an element of guest safety, which is a pretty wide gamut from, you can think of the obvious examples from like lifeguarding to ride operator, but even in the, the laser tag arena, that Chuck has, that safety is the paramount importance. And so they, well-trained staff know the rules. They know how to properly operate the equipment. They know, what's safe and what's not safe for themselves, for the people using the attraction. Even simple things like, at my current job, I have staff that their job is to clean. And so, safety for them means, they know the right products and how to use them, right? So they're not mixing chemicals and doing those kinds of things. And they know that because we train them. Guest experience. So the guest experience, obviously we talked about it, that well-trained staff will provide good experiences to the people coming. Efficiency. So the, whether it's a lineup or the movement of a ride or, the serving of product or whatever, that efficiency basically means, that things are getting done at the quickest, but at the most reasonable pace. So you can think about, going to a restaurant that's efficient, that, the staff isn't like flinging the food at you, but the things are coming out at a reasonable pace, right? They're coming out, you're feeling like this is moving okay, or that the lineup here is moving fine. If you went to Wonderland and the ride operators weren't filling all the seats and the trains were leaving the roller coaster station at a really slow pace, then they're being inefficient, and you're going to be in the lineup going, are you kidding me? Like I've been in this lineup for 3 hours, and they're not even acting like there's any urgency to the matter. Saving on material and repair costs. So, well-trained staff will not waste product. They won't waste equipment. They won't break things because they didn't know that they, you shouldn't be, doing, whatever with it. You can think of, any type of, sort of physical task or piece of equipment that you're going to give them about how to properly handle it or store it or, to maintain it, those different things. So, and those are definitely, costs. When you look at material costs for, attractions, that those are factors that you need to bake in, and that, could be for like spoilage of food and beverage product, or could be things like, paper goods, or, simple things like, inner tubes, at a water park where, if the staff aren't trained to properly inflate them and they're blowing up half of them because they're using the wrong setting on the compressor, those are $12 a tube or $15 a tube for you, and you're buying thousands of them. So, when you start to add up those multiples and you have a bin full of busted tubes because somebody didn't know how to set the compressor properly for that type of tube. That's a cost. And, we always go back to the fact that, this is a for-profit industry. So you need to make sure your bottom line is well covered.
Yeah.
Repeat business, obviously, if you're going to be sustainable in the long run, especially as a small to mid-sized attraction, your entire business model is relying on people coming back. You just don't want somebody to come once and go, done it, and then move on. And that, that flows into all of these things, and word of mouth is the last one about, where Chuck showed the, what people were saying about their experience at Glow Zone 360. That's a version of word of mouth online that people are reading those reviews and getting that. But then if someone patronizes his business and has a fantastic experience, they're going to tell somebody else and say, hey, I went to this Glow Zone place and we had a blast. And, it gets in, maybe there's another family going, it's a rainy day and the kids are bored and they want to do something. And they remember that conversation they had with a friend about this experience. And on the other way, if it's a poor experience, they're going to be like, don't go to that place. It was terrible.
Yeah.
It cost me $100 and it was, the staff were rude.
Yeah, and the rule of thumb is when people have a great experience, or one, which is what they expect, they'll tell, maybe 2 people. If someone has a bad experience, they're going to tell 10 people. So, that's that rule of thumb when it comes to the word of mouth stuff. I look at it, when I was talking to Mike about this as we were building this out, the first 3 lead to the last 2. Right. And the save on material and repair costs is a byproduct of profitability at the end of the day. But in my mind, marketing is responsible for getting the person through the door the first time, and then the overall culture and experience that is built through sound operating processes is what makes them keep coming back. So, and of course marketing takes all the credit, but in reality, marketing really gets them through one time and can set reminders for people who had a good time to come back. But really, it's the experience that is going to drive that repeat visitation. Even a Wonderland relies on season passes, right? You think Wonderland is probably the biggest tourist attraction in Ontario by volume of tourists that come in, or visitors that come in from outside of the immediate area. But when I was talking to Dwayne earlier this year or the year before, he was saying that still 80% of their overall visitation is from people within that 50-kilometer radius. And they have this, they have their own metric of what they consider local, and where they are. You go 50 kilometers, you go from right downtown up to Barrie. So it's a big population that is their local market, and 80% of the people are locals. Which is interesting. I don't think that would be the same thing if you were down at Disney World. I think that they're probably a higher percentage of non-locals, or even the CN Tower for that matter. I think they can't put through as many people a year, but I do think it has more tourists than as a percentage of their total visitation. So anyway, but even us, at Glow Zone, almost 15 to 20% of our business isn't from Brampton or Mississauga. So as a percentage scale, we're on the same scale as a Wonderland in terms of our percentage that are quote unquote tourists. So, but it's that repeat business from the local. That's why you need, for a lot of these attractions, you kind of rely on those locals to keep you going. You want them to keep coming back again and again and again. Disney World relies on word of mouth, so that you come back from your ridiculously expensive trip and say that was the best time ever and you've got to go, so that someone else goes down for a week from out of state or out of country.
Okay. All right, let's play this and then we'll take a break. Does that sound good? So this is an example of what happens when your training is not, I said goes wrong, but maybe your training is not is not great, or that, you know, your processes aren't baked in, or maybe you're just not following up and making sure that the things that you've trained are happening. So this is sort of a good example.
All right. Let's hope it works.
Yeah.
Can you hear it?
And we begin with a KCRA3 investigation. Our undercover cameras catch State Fair ride operators talking and tapping away on their cell phones while they're on the job. And now changes may be on the way to make sure everyone at the State Fair is safe.
KCRA3's Danielle Lee tells us what happened when we showed that undercover video to people in charge.
While you toss, turn, and spin upside down, ride operators are supposed to be watching, making sure the ride functions as it should. But we visited the State Fair on 2 different days last week, and each time caught employees looking down, tapping away, and talking on their cell phones. This operator on the Footloose appears to be texting and charging his phone on the ride. Another employee running the Wave Swinger looks down at his phone in his lap. And this man operating the Windsurfer, he chats away on his phone during the more than 4-minute-long ride.
Well, it's clearly a distraction.
We showed the video to UC Davis professor Steve Luck. He's an expert on the causes of distraction.
The thing about talking on a cell phone is you can be looking right at something and not notice something really important about it because you're focusing on what you're saying.
We searched state and federal regulations and found no policy specific to cell phone use. The state only requires that ride operators are in the immediate vicinity of the ride, and they leave more specific safety regulations up to the independent companies who operate them. Norb Bartosik is the CEO of Cal Expo, and he says the State Fair also relies on the companies furnishing those rides to create safety policies.
Oh, it's their company. I can't tell them what to do. We have a contract with them that basically says they'll follow all safety rules and obligations and regulations.
This year, that company is Butler Amusement, and it turns out they do have a policy about cell phones.
Our policy is no cell phones. They know it.
Butler manager Lance Moyer says employees caught with phones are given a verbal warning the first time. The second time, their phone gets confiscated, and the third time, they get fired. But now Moyer is reconsidering that policy after seeing what we showed him.
Maybe, we need to look at renewing our policies.
Seeing this, what kinds of changes do you think need to be made?
Well, right now, I think I need to have a meeting with all the operators and refresh everybody's memory and maybe go to total termination on the first offense.
And as for the State Fair, CEO Norb Bartosik says he'll be using a private safety consultant to make sure these types of violations stop.
We'll deal with it, and we'll deal with it quickly.
In Sacramento, Danielle Lee, KCRA3 reports.
And it's not just the State Fair with that no phone policy. We checked with some permanent amusement parks about their cell phone policies. Both Six Flags Discovery Kingdom in Vallejo and Great America in Santa Clara say cell phone use by their ride operators is against company policy.
All right. Let's, what is it, 9:05 right now?
Oh, yep.
No. Let's take, what do you think, 5?
Yeah,
10?
I'm good with that.
Okay.
5. Let's go 5.
5. Okay, so at 9:10 we'll jump back in this. All right.
All right.
So
Perfect. Yes.
All right, I'm back to it. I just got to send an email here while we're.
Mhm. All right. Let us know if you're back just by raising your hand or texting in the chat, and then we'll get started again. Thank you, Brittany. No, welcome back. Talis, good to see you again.
All righty.
All right, you want to drop us back into the PowerPoint there?
Yes, yes, I will in a second here. All right.
Okay. So yeah, so the video was meant to sort of illustrate where, you know, obviously they said they had a policy on the cell phones, and I'll tell you that cell phones are, I mean, they're a problem for everybody. But you can see how in this particular example that, you know, that all made it all the way to the nightly news. And, you know, you know, you can imagine then, you know, that reputationally that this, you know, Cal Fair or whoever they were, it seems they were kind of like, I would say they're like the CNE is what I would sort of describe it to you if you're familiar with that kind of setup. But that, you know, that definitely, you know, affects their reputation and their image. And you know, publicly, and at the same time, you know, having their operators on the phone while they're operating the ride certainly isn't conducive to a good safety culture in their organization. So this just kind of hammers home the sort of importance of, you know, of training, and sort of shows all the different facets in terms of, you know, reputationally, from, you know, the experience. I'm sure that, you know, nobody on the rides were like getting a good experience from those operators because they really weren't focused on the job. And, you know, the icing on the cake for the business was that they got on the news, and they got on the news in the wrong way. You know, thankfully it wasn't worse for them that there was an incident or, you know, an injury on those rides, and all of a sudden, you know, it gets highlighted out. But, you know, that's part of the business, right? In terms of, you know, how does your training sort of, you know, focus on those things, and, you know, what elements, how do you follow up on your training, right? So, you know, obviously they said they talked to them about it, but there doesn't appear to be any level of supervision that's making sure they're not doing it, because it was pretty overt. It wasn't like they were just, you know, they happened to stumble upon someone on the phone. It seems like it was pretty much everybody.
That's right. And where were the supervisors during that? Where, you know, there's a bunch of questions. There's a big breakdown, and to me, you know, there's no difference to me for, you know, of that being on the news and that 3-star review that I just got.
Right, because that 3-star review saying that the staff weren't engaged is out there now forever. Right, all we could do is write that response to it saying we will take care of this to make sure that you come back again, and it shouldn't happen. The worst thing that could happen is if they do come back again and they come on a night and my staff aren't engaged with them. Right, like so that's where training continues. It's a continuous thing. So anyway, sorry, Mike, I interrupted.
No.
I gotta stop doing that. Stop going down the rabbit hole.
All right, so training. So we're going to jump into training and go through basically some of the sort of common practices, methodologies that attractions operators use. You can see, you know, there's me giving sort of a Tony Robbins-esque seminar to a bunch of people. It was about real estate. No, it was that was a park orientation. But so some of the methodologies that you have on hand as an operator. So, you know, documents, so manuals, printed materials, you know, that kind of stuff. Online content has become, obviously, I mean, here we are in a virtual classroom. So you can see that online training has become, you know, more and more prevalent, and especially in the pandemic era where, you know, people are looking for ways to deliver training or education in a, in a physically distance or remote, way, so you don't have to do what we're, obviously, that picture showing, me in a conference hall. I mean, those things probably won't happen, anytime soon. So, yeah, you have to kind of, do that kind of stuff. Classroom learning, obviously, hands-on training. So physical, on the job location, using the equipment, and, self-guided practice. So, sort of lessons and things that are, given to people, and have them sort of work that out on their own time, or go through it, or practice or demo, those kinds of things. So they all have their place. They all get used in the attractions industry. And so we're going to, in the next few slides, and we're going to go through some of these individually and talk about where they fit, and how, attractions, typically use them. And I'm going to sort of, definitely spin it more towards seasonal attractions, and that I've been sort of had experience in, to talk about how we sort of employed those methodologies to create that sort of overall training package. Because there's never just a training session. There's usually many, and there's a progression, because you get, like I said before, you got to take a staff member that has no experience and no, has never been exposed to these pieces of equipment or these different, practices, and you need to get them, up to a point where they can do that on a frontline level, right? And sometimes there are huge safety implications and things like that. So you just don't want to, if you think about those roller coasters at Wonderland, the person operating it, they didn't just get hired that afternoon and put them in that operator's booth and go, have a good time, push the green button, it's all going to be great, right? So there's definitely a learning curve to that. So
I would definitely add an extra layer of adventure and thrill for the for the riders. More importantly, Mike, you're wearing a suit for an attraction, dude. It's all about fun. What's with the suit?
Oh, well, I'll this, in terms of and this is Wet n Wild, and our orientations, what we wanted to do is, we even asked the staff to dress professionally. And why we did that was because, a lot of these people, this is their first job experience. So what we said was, all right, well, this is usually your first paid shift. Happens usually about 6 weeks before the park opens. This is the first time you're going to show up and you're going to be on the payroll. So as a sort of cultural thing, what our organization said was that we want you to look professional. We want you to show that you are, that you are interested, that that you are going to work today. And so, for me, I forgoed the tie because I'm not a tie guy, but, it was setting the tone from the beginning that, we're going to be professional about our approach to operating this business. The presentation was fun. With the picture doesn't show, is that, we had a DJ, and, we had all these things going on. So it was a very lively presentation, with lighting and all this kind of stuff, but that the tone we set was professional, that, we didn't want you showing up in your pajamas, or, I had a guy once show up to training, and I won't post it in this thing, but he wore a shirt with like profanity on it to his first training session. And I took a picture because the supervisor didn't pick it up. Right. And I was like, did you see this guy? And they're like, oh my God. I'm like, well, you can't. And then, they had to pull him aside and say, you realize like you're working right now, like you can't show up with that kind of t-shirt. And he was like a 17-year-old, and he's like, I didn't realize it, because that's just how he dressed. But, it was sort of a training moment. So, all right, so let's go.
Sorry, I'm assuming, because you're in a conference kind of setting, that rows 4 to 25 are full, and these are just the keeners that came late, or the people that came late that came in the front rows.
Yeah.
Yeah, always the way. These people here in those front rows will typically be your best staff members.
Yeah.
Especially if they came early and sat in the front row, and weren't the ones that dragged their butts in late and were like, oh, I got to go to the front row.
I always volunteered the people in the back for the interactive section. So come on up on the stage and help me through this. But anyway. All right. So how do attractions do this? And like I mentioned before, I'm going to kind of take a more seasonal attraction sort of bent on this, and there is no formula. It's not like, everything that we do in this course, every operator will take elements of these things, so you can find similarities, but how you do it is entirely up to you, right? And there's no attractions industry regulator that's saying you must do this. There are some things in like local regulations about how you document your training, but they don't talk about what you actually have to train. But this is sort of a general sort of formula in terms of or progression of how it goes. Training, it starts at the point of hire. So when we ran our job fairs, or when we did our interviews, things like that, we introduced our organizational culture there. So the people that you meet, like the example there in our orientation, we had a dress code, and our dress code was professional. Some may be a different dress code, but there's always, you're going to set the tone at the beginning. So you're not going to meet somebody in some shady coffee shop or do weird things like that. You're going to set the tone. You're going to do it in a manner that's reflective of your business and your culture, right? We're going to walk your talk, is basically what we said. Like, if we're about friendly and inviting, then make sure that your first interaction with a prospective hire is friendly, inviting, or that if you're going to ask people to be a certain dynamic and all those kinds of things, then be that yourself, right? Be organized, be all those things. So that was the beginning. Staff onboarding. So what we mean by staff onboarding is, once you've decided to make a hire, there's a process in which it's an HR driven process, but there's a process in which you need to take them from an applicant to an employee. And that could be getting information from them, getting them to sign documents, to do different things. So we would run a very quick onboarding sessions, where we would, and sometimes that could be online now because of, sort of people's, attempts to sort of reduce social interactions when not necessary. But, at the time, we would bring people in very small groups, walk them through all the documentation, because there's tax forms and your employee contract and all these other things. And we would set the tone there as well about, let's walk through some of the I called it kind of this is your chance to decide whether you want to be part of this for sure or not. So, introduce them to any rules or things that they would need to know. Maybe it's a grooming code. Maybe it's a code of conduct. Maybe it's, expectations that you're going to have to, purchase a uniform, do all those things. That's going to happen there. And it's that sort of last sort of chance before you kind of make that decision, both ways, right? So you're hiring that person and they're accepting the job, and that in accepting the job, they know what they're signing up for. It's about transparency. It's about just being upfront about what's going to happen. What is your life going to be like working for our organization? And what are we going to be asking from you? And if you can't deliver on that, that's fine. But it could be all kinds of things. Typically, like I said, grooming codes are sort of fairly common in the industry. They've relaxed them quite a bit in the years. I mean, when I started, it was very, very, like men's hair must be cut this way, and women's hair must be worn this way, and all those things. And never any piercings, never any tattoos. Well, good luck now finding anyone without a tattoo. So all those things, they change and they evolve, but you need to be able to explain what you're asking from people. Orientation. So your orientation session, that's your big, like I said, we did a dynamic, presentation where it was like, let's set the tone right now. We're making this a party. We're going to make it fun. And we're going to talk about things that we don't necessarily need to do, like outside standing, because typically for seasonal attractions at Wonderland, we were training ride operators in April, and anybody who's lived in Toronto long enough knows that April is a hit and miss month. So sometimes you're freezing, sometimes it's beautiful. Why try to lecture somebody on the platform of a ride as opposed to just let them operate the ride? Let's do the physical motion. So orientation is about that sort of organizational culture and just giving people a sense of what they need to know. You provide training manuals, online learning, hands-on training always comes kind of after those bits, right? So you're going to take somebody, you're going to physically teach them the role, right? You're going to have somebody guide them through that. Usually with ride operators, we were training those rides. There were no passengers or guests on the ride. It was just, here's the ride. let's play around with it. Let's get you comfortable with the machine so that you know how it operates, how it behaves, and all of the ways in which you can use it, and not to be afraid of it in terms of some of these things are really large machines, and so we need you to respect it, but we don't want you to fear it. So we want you to be able to handle it. In-service training, and we talk about that a little later, but that's training that goes on sort of during the season. And then annual refreshers. So you're going to have returning staff. So are you going to bring them and put them through this entire gamut of training, or are you going to do something that's a little more expedited so that it's like, you've done this before, let's talk about what's new, and let's refresh you on some of the really key important messages that we want to make sure that you remember from last year, and shake off a bit of the rust, because maybe you finished your operating season in the fall and these returning people are coming back in the spring, so they've had months of time away from it, and they just need a little practice. So okay.
Yeah, and then I'll walk through our process at Glowzone. It's a permanent, it's year round. So we always try to hire students who are in grade 10, grade 9 or 10, so that we know that we've got a couple of years with them as they grow through, and hopefully by the time they hit grade 12 they can become a key holder, so a supervisor, and then then they're off, right? They off to school, but some will stay home and continue to work part-time while they're doing their studies. So the way we do it, we do a constant intake, meaning that we are wait until we need 3 or 4 part-timers, and then we will do interviews. But how we choose who we're interviewing is really, it's based on people who make the effort to come in and drop off their resumes. So if someone has dropped off a resume, it's marked, and the staff themselves, because it's not always Ryan or I or Maura or Mark who are there, especially on the weekends, or in the late in the evening. If someone drops it off, the staff get to comment and say that in person, and they can say their initial thoughts on the candidate. So how you present yourself, even as you're applying, can be important, and it certainly is in our line of work. So then we go through, and we know we have 5 positions to hire, and so we'll probably set up 10 interviews for the 5 hires, and then Ryan and I will sit down, and one of the first questions we ask is, have you played here before? And typically the answer is yes. And then we ask, what did they enjoy most? What do they remember most? And these people walk us through why they wanted to apply and what it was that they remembered. And that sort of sets that tone of what the interview is. The interview is just your standard behavioral model, like, oh, where do you go to school? What are your extracurricular activities? What experience do you have? Tell us about a time when you got into an argument with your parents or a coworker, and how did you resolve it? Or one of your classmates, how did you resolve it? Your standard questions, keeping in mind that most of these people, it's their very first interview, their very first time, and we recognize that they're going to be nervous. Those that are able to overcome that nervousness, right, and portray some confidence, and aren't all mousy because they're talking to the big scary adults, are typically the ones that will bubble to the top. And we just say we pick our 5. Our onboarding is done all at the same time. So what we'll do is we'll pick a day to have all 5 of the new staff come, and we do onboarding and orientation at the same time. So we will sit down with them, and we'll give them a tour of the facility, and we'll talk about all the different roles and all the cool stuff that we're doing, and all the great reasons that they should be excited that they got the job, and we're so thrilled that they're part of the team. And it's all about us being the team. It's not, there's no individuals at our work. You win as a team, you lose as a team, and that's that culture. And we start to build that from the very beginning. And then we walk them through all the forms that they're going to have to fill out. And then we go through the staff manual. And I think what I'll do is I will, in this week's content, I'll actually post our staff manual because I wrote it, right? It was written by us. It wasn't written by some HR person. So it's probably a little rough around the edges compared to what, you know, a big organization has. But it really, says what our expectations are. Here's what we expect to do. Here's what you can do. Here's our rules on how you are going to interact with the customers, how you're going to interact with each other, and dress code, all of those things. And we walk them through the staff manual. They then have time to review it, but they then sign basically a code of conduct that says, I've read this, I understand it, and I'm going to follow it. And we want to make sure that they keep that and can keep using that as a refresher. And then so that's one of the training, it's like a training manual, and we give that to them. And then we send them home with their forms, and they fill them out, and they bring them back on their first shift, along with their void check or their banking information, because we do direct deposit, like all of those little nitty-gritty things. They don't come in cold. It's not like you just start your shift. We actually do 2 or 3 weeks of shadowing. So we eat the cost, and it's tough sometimes as a small business. We're eating the cost of 15 to 20 hours per staff member who comes in and shadows someone who's a seasoned staff member. And we are very careful to pick and choose who are the people that are doing the shadowing. And they usually start with shadowing a birthday party, which is a really good introduction to everything that we do at GlowZone, because a birthday party is going into laser tag, a birthday party is going into the arcade, a birthday party sometimes goes into the mini golf, although most of them are laser tag parties, but there are mini golf parties. So the staff member is responsible for that party. They know that it is their job from the time that kid and the parent walk in till the time they leave. The one staff member is in charge of that person's good time. So they shadow, they walk them all the way through it, and they get about 15 hours of shadowing before they get to do their very first party on their own. So if you think about it, if we hire 5 people at $15, at 15 hours at $15 an hour, you're at $750 of investment just on the shadowing for these staff, plus the time that we paid them, the 3 hours that we paid them for their onboarding and orientation. It's a huge training. Staff is a huge cost and investment. We call it, it's not really a cost, we call it an investment, because you do it right, you will recoup that money, because they're going to then add to the overall culture of your organization, which will hopefully lead to repeat visitation and word of mouth. But that's sort of how we get them in there. And then every single week when we send out the schedule, Ryan has a paragraph on what we want people to focus on. So we talk about things that went great last week, and we congratulate staff. We talk about things that did not go well, and we say this is what we expect, just as a reminder. And and then any other priorities for the week. We have a group of 100 coming in, so let's make sure the night before we're ready for it. We also have a WhatsApp group of all of the key holders, all of the supervisors, and that's sort of where we get more into the nitty-gritty. So if Ryan comes in and something hasn't been done, like it hasn't been cleaned correctly, he'll take a couple of pictures and he'll say, hey, these are the sort of things we're seeing. Doesn't call anyone out, but says this isn't acceptable. Let's make sure that you're the supervisor, make sure that you're getting the rest of the team to do it. And when you're working with a bunch of kids, it's difficult sometimes, right? Because they were all staffed together, they're all friends, and it becomes a very social thing. But it becomes difficult. They turn into the supervisor or the shift supervisor, and now they're responsible for making sure their friends are doing what they're supposed to be doing. It's different when I'm working a shift or Ryan's working a shift, because we're the owners, and there's no friendship there. It's not like we're going and hanging out at McDonald's afterwards. but so it's easier for us to get them to do it. But we have to, when we start training the supervisors, we have to train them to be comfortable being the delegators. And it's funny because we've got one that just became a key holder and is going through the shadow shifting closing, which is very different. And I was working with her a couple of weeks ago, and I see why she's becoming a key holder. Like, she is a spitfire. Like, the amount, like, she just never stops. And if she's not interacting with the customers, she's cleaning something and getting things done. And I'm like, this is awesome. And I asked her, I said, you seem to be a doer. And we know, and you know that we're looking to put you into a supervisory role. Can you be the delegator? And she goes, it's not in my nature, but I'm willing to learn how to do it. And that was enough for us. But we will have to train her on how to do that effectively, because if not, she might be running a Tuesday shift. It's her and one other person, and if it's someone she knows and they get along, that person can walk all over her and she'll do all the work because she likes to do all the work. It's not her job to do all the work. It's her job to separate the work and say, you're going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to do this, this, and this. So anyway, and then we also do twice a year, we get all the staff together and we do staff refreshers. And we play games, and a lot of the times, because we've got new staff that come in, it's they're fun get to know you games, because not all the staff have even met each other because they're all working, they're working different shifts. And we do pizza parties. We do an annual. We partner with another attraction typically, and all of our staff will go there, and we'll do paintball, or we'll go to Dave and Buster's or somewhere like that and have a fantastic time. And then we invite their staff to come and do the same thing. So we try to do these big staff outings, and we actually, when we can, we combine both locations, which is a blast, because now you've got the staff from our two locations getting to know each other. And then we always pick a Monday or a Tuesday when it's slow. And then Mark, who's the other partner who has a full-time job, and myself, we work at the location to keep the location open. And then once we close, we go and join in. So it is a constant, there's no end to the amount of training and the reminders and all of that kind of stuff, because nobody knows it all. And if they do know it all, they've forgotten something, and we need to get them back to remember it. So that's where we are. Hopefully that didn't bore you too much. That's how how we run. All right, go ahead, okay, Michael.
All right, and I touched on these, so I won't dwell on it too much. There's the picture of this is Wet and Wild orientation 2018, I think, or something like that.
Is Gavin in there? Is Gavin in there somewhere? He's probably at the back.
I think he is. He's in the back causing trouble. So, and I talked about earlier, so this is usually the first training the employee receives. And so some of the considerations, you have to think about is, sort of your venue and how you want to do it. Some places, if you have a small staff, you can sort of do those sort of, at your location, maybe, somewhere tucked away and like, in a seating area or something like that. A really large organization like Canada's Wonderland would never be able to get all their staff in one room because they have like 3,000 of them. So they do multiple sessions. Wet and Wild, the staff was about 500. So, we rented out a banquet hall and did it there, and did our orientation there. And you can see, where we brought everybody in. It didn't matter what department you were in. This is the very first training. So you could be a ride operator, a food attendant, a gardener, or whatever. You're all going to get the same sort of top line training. So, and as I mentioned there, this is about creating that shared set of values and goals, helping the employee understand what they can expect from you as an organization. And the way I framed it is, this is what we expect from you as a team member here at this facility. So, being friendly and being safe and showing up on time and doing all those other things. And here's what you can expect from us. We're going to, provide you with this. we're going to, give you, these staff perks. We're going to pay you every 2 weeks. We're going to do all those things. So that would be your orientation and onboarding. So, all right, the next one. So your manuals in online learning. This is definitely not a picture of a manual, because I thought a manual picture would be boring in this section or whatever, but this is some frontline training here going on in an admissions area. But your manuals in online learning, you need to document your training. It helps in terms of consistency in your message. So from year to year, from person to person, that you're building your documentation of your training and your procedures and your process. And when we talk later in the course about sort of risk management and things like that, one of the things that will come up, if you have an occurrence or an issue at your facility that, becomes, maybe an insurance matter, or, something even, sort of more, sort of complex, that you'll always refer back to those written documented training processes as what you were going to be doing. So, obviously you can't record every training session. You don't know exactly the words coming out of every trainer's mouth, but if you put your practices on paper, then you can distribute those. Like Chuck has his employee handbook, which in there is going to talk about your code of conduct and the things that you can't do. And, it may outline specific procedures for certain things, like how to turn on the whatever, and it's going to be a step-by-step guide. And that's something that someone can refer back to, but it is a written record of your procedures, your policies, and that's the basis of everything. So you create this standardization by building your documentation. It could be in a manual form. It could be a web page. At Wet n Wild, we had a staff web portal that they would log into, and there would be, and even at Lifetime where I'm working now, we have the same thing where you would log into. There could be training documents. There could be videos on things. So if you want to show somebody how to make a hamburger, then, you could have someone actually dress the hamburger on a video, right? And sort of now that with the online, sort of training methodologies, you have a lot more flexibility on the medium that you use, but you're delivering that in a certain way. Or if you had any process that you wanted to do, you could show documents, videos, things like that. So go Chuck.
I was gonna say, in these processes, that's operations, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the burger one is a good example. We just got pizza ovens for Mississauga. We've had them in Brampton for a while. We took the opportunity to create the how do you build a pizza and cook a pizza process, and it's all visual, from the when do you take the shells out to the how much sauce, how much cheese, where do you put the pepperonis, how do you get it on, how do you take it off, how do you cut it, and it's a boom 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 boom, and people are like, oh man, like that's like, people should just know that, and they will once they've done it 4 times. But I can tell you, the first time I never had any training, and it was my turn to make some pizzas, and Ryan's like, man, the pizza you just made cost 50% more than what the standard is, because I put on too much sauce and I put on too much cheese, and it was a mess. It was spilling over the edges. So having those processes in place, that's what operations is all about.
Yeah, and that flows back to, remember when we talked about material and goods cost, that properly training the staff to do a particular task, in this case making a pizza, if they make it by standard, then yes, your cost could be, everything is built on your cost, right? So your cost of goods and your cost of goods sold and everything that builds into that you factored, your price of a pizza was $19.99, and your goods cost in that was, let's say, 30% of that. So, if you start adding more and you do it one pizza, it costs maybe, $2 a pizza. But if you're an establishment that's serving hundreds of pizzas a day, then that quickly adds up. And so then that's where you're building in your standardization, your processes. And so these online bits in your documented training, the way, you can think of them too, is that they're a great way to sort of send that out, to do it. It's more free form. It allows your team members to ingest information before you have them as a sort of a captive audience in a specific location or place. You want to use those, in this particular picture, this hands-on training, the trainer is showing them examples of ticket types that they're going to see. and she's standing in front of one of the point of sale terminals so that she can physically go through them. And then afterwards, these people are going to go rotate through these stations and do the same tasks. And before they arrived there, they would have went through online training about some of the systems, processes, terminologies, stuff like that, so that when they arrive, they have a base level of training that doesn't need to be reviewed. They know that that they're going to be doing this, or that the policy in handling tickets is that you rip them. And we're going to reinforce those messages, but they've gotten a baseline of what to be expected. So, all right. And then you've got your hands-on training. And I put a quote up here. I didn't attribute who the quote was from because I have no idea. So we're gonna, I stole it from an old supervisor manual that I had.
It was you, Mike. It was
me. It was me. I admit. So, or it was somebody else. But anyway, I will not accept any royalties or money for this quote. So anyway, it says, training is a coin, right? And we talked about this. There's that teaching of theory, which you can get through your online delivery, your training manuals, your things like that. And then there's the demonstration of that theory and the techniques and the actual practice. So, and here you have an example, an image of, this is Wet and Wild, its very first season. The park is about 80% built in this training picture. So
that's our buddy. That's our buddy Peter. I've known him since the day he was born. Freezing his toes off because that water is when is this? This is probably May.
Yeah, it's early May, and
unheated
the pool
water
is still the pool is still filling because the water line's not all the way up to the top. But sometimes when you're building things, you have to just roll with it. And we were like, this is the best opportunity we have to do this, so let's do it. And so there's a very brave bunch of lifeguards learning some skills. But by the time they got to this, they had already gone through all of those steps we mentioned before. So they've been through orientation, they'd been onboarded, they'd received their training manuals, they'd done some online modules. They're lifeguards, so they already had lifeguard training through the Life Saving Society or the Red Cross, because that's the law in Ontario. So they had those certificates, and now we are taking what the materials that we gave them and we're putting them into practice. So we're going to do that. And to make it as valuable as possible, these training sessions need to be hands-on, they need to be active. And even when I taught people to train ride operators at Wonderland or Ontario Place or wherever, it was all about less talk, more do. So it's like, all right, you've read this in the manual, let's go out and we are just gonna let's get this going. And I would always, tell the supervisors on the roller coasters, within, 15 minutes of you walking the crew up onto the ride, let's have this thing running. Even if they're just watching a demo because you've got some more experienced staff and you're saying, okay, watch what we do. And we're going to talk about what we're doing. And then we're going to rotate you through these stations. But we want you to be with this. And in a lot of cases in the seasonal industries, you don't have a whole lot of time to get this training done because one, you're waiting for the park to be ready for them to train. Maybe you've got to set these pieces of equipment up. In this case, we had to fill that pool, and the weather needed to be right, and there's a lot of maintenance and things that have to go on in order for you to get there. So you have a very small window of time, and you want to make that super valuable because maybe the next time they use it, there's going to be real people on it, or there's going to be real people in that pool, and you don't want to to have that as an interruption. So make your hands-on training valuable, make it effective, and sometimes you have to sort of read the room too, right? If that day was rainy and it was terrible and all that kind of stuff, your training's not going to be great. Maybe you have to think about moving it or changing it, or, in some cases, we've for lifeguards in, the water park industry, we've rented pools from, community centers or from, universities and things like that, and said to the staff, we're going to do the bulk of our water training indoors because we know that it's going to be cold. But eventually, in these cases, these people have already done some indoor training. We got to get in this wave pool, so we're going to do it, and we're going to try our best to get that done.
Another interesting thing, this was a great example that Mike put up, is Peter doesn't work for Wet and Wild. Peter is a third party service provider. So even before the training starts, Mike and Peter would have had to get together, because last week Mike showed the dot map, right, of where the people were going to be positioned in the pool. So Mike had already put that all together. Peter's got to train that. Peter has to explain why we're doing it and how to scan those zones and that sort of thing. So the trainer needs to be trained on what the processes are, so they, especially if they're a third party service provider who has a specialty, to go from there. So it's an interesting, it's just an interesting concept you have to think about, is who's doing the training, and do they know what the latest and the greatest is in terms of what those procedures are going to be.
Okay, next one. So yeah, the training never ends, and we talked about this as a continuous process. And in some cases where you're a year-round business, then it's definitely, they had some grand opening training when they started, but they're never going to shut down again to start, to retrain any staff or do those kinds of things. And you can think about all those year-round attractions, the ROM, the AGO, the CN Tower, the aquarium, all that. They don't close much. So, they're bringing people in and they're doing it, but they're also, there's training that goes on continuously. There's always learning, there's always things going on. And in the attractions industry, much like many other industries, we call those in-service training sessions. And in some of them, they're mandated, like in aquatics, we had in your employment contract that you needed to attend so many hours of in-service training a month to remain qualified in your position. And Riot Operators was the same thing, that you needed 3 hours of in-service training, and we would do it in a way that it was flexible, so that the trainers that were doing those things would say, okay, well, we're going to run training every morning during this particular week between the hours of 8 and 11, and you can book yourself into a session that works for your schedule, but we're going to cover the same topics. And those could be refreshers of things, and I mentioned here, so some reasons for that would be changes in procedures or process. So maybe in the you as the operator or manager or owner have sort of decided that you're going to revise a process because of whatever reason, something happened and you're like, oh, we got to change that, or we think there's a better way to do this, or maybe it's from employee feedback or things like that. So there's a change and you want to make sure that that's communicated. To reinforce or practice skills that need to be reactionary. So example in lifeguarding, the lifeguards, they need to be trained to react, right? And we would go on the, we had all these slogans up, and the one I remember was like, if you don't know, you go. And so, some of those things was about, we were training into those staff the instinct to react. And some of those things require skills that they don't use every day. Like for example, again, in lifeguarding, you would hope that they're not going to have to deliver CPR to somebody every day on the job. But they have to know how to do it by instinct, so that if God forbid the occasion ever happened where they needed to do that, or like maybe your medical staff and all those, we would drill out these emergency procedures of what would happen if the worst thing happened. And everybody needs to be able to pick up and go. And because you're not going to get a warning that it's going to happen, it just could happen on some random day, that those in-service trainings are going to reinforce those skills to make sure that if you ever needed to do it, that it was reflexive, that people were just able to do it. There wasn't, this kind of thing, because maybe time is of the essence in those things. Like
I'm going to interject with a story about that, Michael, if you would allow.
Yeah,
me.
Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
So back when I was in university, I worked at the pool. I was a lifeguard and an instructor, and I was teaching an aquatic emergency first aid course to the rest of my peers, to the lifeguards. And so, same thing, running through all the different scenarios, and they were having to react to it and fix the problem. And one of the scenarios I had was that a person had had their arm severed for whatever reason, just above the elbow here. And it was a boyfriend.
That sounds very Tiger King,
I know.
I'm never going to financially recover from this.
I know. So it was a boyfriend girlfriend combo that were doing it, and I had him lose his arm, and she put on the the padding and got it all fixed and did everything that she was supposed to do. And everyone passed the course, and we all went out for drinks afterwards, as you're supposed to do. About 3 months later, the two of them were hiking on the Bruce Trail, and a boulder let go on the escarpment and clipped him in the head and tore his arm off. And his girlfriend was there, and they were and basically saved his life, packed his arm, did this, did that. And there was another friend with him and got him. Like, she grabbed the arm, because we talked about if you can save the arm, they can reattach. So she grabbed the arm. The other guy, there was a little dog there that had a choke chain, so they tourniqueted it and they packed it and they rushed him, a kilometer or two to a farmhouse, called the ambulance, off you go. Well, they couldn't save the arm because it wasn't a clean cut. It was torn off it. So when I saw him, a month or so later, when he'd been released from the hospital, I said, what the heck? So what were you thinking? He goes, well, the first thing that went through my mind was frickin' Chuck. Like, it's like we had predicted that this was going to happen. But it was one of those things where who in their right mind would ever think? And I was joking around a little bit when I had it, this horrible incident where he had to pretend his arm had been chopped off. But she planned for it, she trained for it, and she saved his life because of it. So that's what we talk about, this reactionary thing. If you expect the unexpected and you're ready for it, it can help. So anyway, continue on.
Yeah, and then so the other two we listed here. So correct undesired behaviors or results. So you take your feedback from like Chuck showed those Google reviews. Right now you get, as an operator, you get more feedback than you've ever gotten before. In the pre-internet days, we had, these sort of what we called the guest service action reports. So if someone went to guest services and, complained or said something, then someone at guest services would document that. And then, everybody could read those reports every day and see what people were coming to guest services to ask about or talk about. And they documented those questions, but you didn't get the level of feedback you get now, because all through Google and Yelp and every other social platform out there, somebody's writing something in, right? So you get a lot of feedback about what is working and what's not working. And or in this case where the video that we showed with the operators on the telephone, they were basically talking about having some sort of in-service training, right, about reminding those kinds of things. So they were kind of a little bit going through that, or they were kind of detailed in their process. But yeah, if you had those same issues where you were reinforcing behaviors that just weren't happening, whether it was because maybe your process was always to greet somebody when they arrived and maybe that wasn't happening consistently, or the message or the instructions at the beginning of the laser tag game are very specific about here are the rules of the game and here's how you turn on your equipment and all that kind of stuff. If they're not doing that consistently, or maybe you want to just reinforce that behavior because it's important to the game, then you're going to go, that'll be part of your in-service. And lastly, skill building, staff development, right? So learning is continuous. You introduce new topics, new concepts. You want people to learn and grow in their roles. And, whether that means that because they're going to be, either going to move towards supervisory positions or more senior positions in your organization. People like to learn new skills. So, as people get more comfortable in their jobs and in their roles, maybe there are opportunities to give them more responsibility, or to let them expand on the things that they're doing, to enhance the experience and to have more control over what's going on. Usually, in the training of, staff at parks and things like that, we would give them sort of some pre-canned, ways in which they could deal with specific issues that are going on in the park, or how to say, how to correct a certain situation that's going to come up maybe from a guest. But as they get more comfortable through the season, you want to give them license to be more creative, because now they may understand the park a little bit better, or the attraction a little bit better, and they understand what tools are available to them. So to give them license to kind of do more and to expand out, creates that sort of, autonomy within the staff, gives them control over their activities, and as Chuck said, to own the problems, right, so that they can make decisions and do those kinds of things. So in-service training could be a great technique for you to sort of expand on those things and let people, it's like sandboxing, so they can test those things out, or they can try them out in a controlled space where there's no real impact, because they're testing them out on other employees or other members of the team or things like that, so we can see whether it works or doesn't work, or critique or comment on it. So all right, so I think we're going to, we can take a break, and then we can jump into the assignment stuff. I think, Chuck, is that?
Yeah, I think that makes good sense. All right, what time is it? It's 10 o'clock. So why don't we do another 5 minutes? We might get out of here early today, Michael.
Don't promise things, but
that's true. Yeah, we could also go down a rabbit hole of some fun stories, and it could go on and go on forever. Okay, so why don't we do 10 minutes this time? So anyone who is now watching this can record or fast forward over the next 10 minutes. We'll come back at 10:10, give you a chance to refresh your coffees, go to the washroom, get yourself something to eat. Okay, we'll see you in 10. All right. Let us know. We still have a minute, but let us know if you're back with a thumbs up or a little note in the chat.
What is going on? All right.
Oh, are you having some technical difficulties this time, Michael?
No, just me being not smart. So, but I figured it out. So.
All right.
All right. Well, I guess before we go into the assignment, when we get back, anyway, we'll give it a minute, but maybe we'll just sort of open things up and for questions or comments or things like that. Just
true. That was a lot to digest today, and I think we did probably a little bit more talking to you or at you guys than we normally do, because we're getting into some of the nitty gritty when it comes to processes. So with that in mind, you can go off speaker and or type any comments in the chat. Like, what did you learn anything new? What are your thoughts on how to recruit and train?
Yeah, or you just questions about how we talked about a lot of examples of ways, or how, if you want us to elaborate, or even sort of bring up personal sort of stories or recollections of how those things were handled, or what sort of problems you could foresee that we may have had to overcome in doing those kinds of things.
All right, Brittany.
Yeah, I have a comment. So we're actually, this semester, we also have a human resources class. And it's actually funny that your content and that Professor Olinda, her content is actually kind of matched up. So we're doing we're doing training and kind of like company culture stuff kind of in her class as well. And I definitely think to be honest, because she's doing the human resources thing, I found your guys' take on it and all the training and the information you provided to be much easier to follow. And even though you said you guys were talking a lot, it was still more engaging. Not to say that like her class and teaching wasn't great or anything, but no, like it was really great, and I think it was good. Yeah.
Well, that's because Michael Scott had it right about HR, and I'm kidding.
No, because Michael, this is being recorded. Stop.
I'm kidding. I think when you look, I mean, there is a lot to talk. I mean, when you look at training, I mean, we're giving you a very high level, sort of introduction to it, right? There's a lot that goes into sort of training theory and development, and a lot. I'll say a lot of my experiences through the industry. Have sort of, it's all sort of builds on each other, right? That, you spend a lot of time. And when I, mentioned that quote about the single most important job of a manager is to train people, we took that very seriously at a lot of the organizations that I was at. And we invested, we had the benefit of an off season. And so when people ask me what I did in my off season, there was a lot of sort of, financial planning and sort of operational planning, but some of it too was learning how to train and to go to, there are a lot of agencies, organizations, associations in the attractions industry, and a lot of what they focus on is let's talk about that sort of human element about how to train and develop your staff. And so I would, I'd go to courses and programs, and in aquatics, especially in the lifeguarding industry, I would say one of the strongest sort of associations or groups of operators in the attractions industry is the aquatics industry, and that they have a benefit because a lot of them use sort of a shared sort of third party approach to certification and training, because Ontario is really the only jurisdiction, or Canada is the only jurisdiction in North America that uses this sort of NLS type thing, whereas in the United States is obviously a little bit more akin to their sort of method of doing things, which is that there are many providers because nobody has a monopoly on this. So but there is one particular provider that gets used very frequently because their training program is focused very deeply on the water park industry as opposed to like community pools and things like that. So there is a shared resource. So we would go and spend a whole week at, in Texas usually, or Florida, or somewhere warm in the wintertime, which was great. And but we would spend a whole week about how to teach and how to train these programs. Some of it was about, like, when you were new, just learning the skill and becoming really proficient on it. But then once you got past that, it was more about how do we deliver this training in a way that's engaging, that meets the needs of your students or your staff, and all those different pieces like that, and how to work through it. And it was definitely, like I said, the theory gets a little deep, but going through it. But I think, at the core of it, it's about being, it's getting your message across, doing it in a way that, gets remembered, and, people enjoy what they're doing. And, for the attractions industry, especially, where I felt that, the staff really get the most benefit out of training is get your hands dirty, right? Get in there and, and get active, go play with the equipment, go, push buttons, and and do all these different things, and do it in a safe space where there's very little consequence to getting it wrong. And it's more about a learning thing where, if we did it wrong, or we even a ride, they're so computerized that, it's not like you can intentionally break the thing. You're not going to smash them together, but you may put it in some sort of fault mode where it's shut down. And we'd use that as an example and say, okay, to the operators, it's like, what did you do wrong here? And they're like, well, I forgot to do this button, and then that created an error, and now I got to call someone over to reset it and do those things. So now I've impacted the operation and do all that kind of stuff. So, well, let's do it in training, because I want you to see what it looks like. And, and there's nobody on the ride that's going to be like inconvenienced because they're, hung up 100 feet in the air on a chain lift because you shut the ride down, and now you got to wait for, someone in maintenance to come and reset it. So it's really, about sort of making that a worthwhile experience.
Yeah, and for us, when we've been talking about this, we're relating it right back to the roles and the success of the operations of these attractions. And it's so I think that might be part of the reason why, because it's relatable, right? HR, there's a lot more to HR than what we've talked about today, and there's a lot of theory behind it. So we've sort of just dug into some very specifics. But we used to have, what was that program you should do, like a 10,000 foot view of that, to give them the pickle thing, right?
That's right.
That was about customer service. It was customer service training, and I went through it a couple times, but I don't completely remember all the ins and outs of it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember?
Yeah, the given the pickle was more about it's an example of a restaurant where it talked about just giving somebody more than they expect. Or there's always, it's like going to anybody here been to Five Guys, the burger place?
Yeah.
What is their hook? What is their thing?
Five Guys?
At Five Guys, when you order your meal, it's always in a paper bag. They never give you a takeout tray, and there's a reason for it, because they throw, and it comes down to when you get a fast food meal or whatever in a paper bag, there's always those bonus fries that fall in the bottom of the bag fries. So what they do at Five Guys is that they make the burger, they give you this generous pile of fries, right? And then they pour an extra scoop of fries into the bag before they close it up. And that's their hook. That's their gimmick. And it's a version of this, give them the pickle, right? You're giving somebody something they didn't expect it. You bought a cup, like you got that container of fries, but we're going to put a little extra in there for you because we know it's a little treat, right? It's exciting because you're like, oh, there's extra fries in the bottom of this bag, right? It's the same idea. And a lot in the attractions industry, you're looking for those opportunities to give somebody more than what they expected. Disney does it all the time, right? They call it the magic, right? They're adding in those little touches that some people don't notice. It's the hidden Mickeys and all that other stuff. I don't know if you know the hidden Mickeys, but everywhere you go in Disney, there's a Mickey hidden somewhere. There's some people who spend their entire Disney experience trying to find them, but there's look, the garden is shaped like a Mickey, or there's a little logo on the wall plug that's a Mickey, and all those things. And that's about just giving them that little extra bit. So
yeah, and then at Glow Zone. So when I work Wednesday nights, and I'm trying to instill this in the rest of the staff, Wednesday night's not a typically busy night. It's a lot of people out on dates, and they will, they'll spend $10 each to play mini golf, which is great. But we have a what we call a 360 combo, which is sort of that value combo where it's a round of mini golf, a game of laser tag, and a $5 arcade card for $15. And now these guys are coming in just to play mini golf because it's the two of them, and are spending 10. So when they come out of mini golf, what I'll do is I always, before they go in, I tell them to lay their bets beforehand, like losers buying coffee, like just have some fun with them. They come out, I find out who won. I commiserate with the person who's now in charge of buying dinner. But then I say, well, let's see if you can get some redemption. And I pay for a 3-game arcade challenge. That is a game of air. They play each other in air hockey. They do a game of cruising the world against each other, and then they play basketball. And it's unexpected, and they love it. They're like, oh my goodness, I get to play these extra games for free. It doesn't cost me a dime. We own the games, right? And it gives them that extra experience. And then, I would say that probably, 30% of the time people will then come and buy an arcade card, which they probably hadn't thought of buying, which is a good upsell. But more importantly, you get a review like that one from the woman who I played her in air hockey, because she had played her kids and her partner a few times and was kicking their butt. So I was like, okay, here we go. I'll take you on. And it was all in fun, but it led to a really good review. So always the whole notion of service, all of our training, and Brittany, when you talk about relating it into the tourism business, all of the training leads up to how does your role add to the amazing guest experience. All right. So on a busy Saturday at Glow Zone, when we've got one person working the kitchen, that's their job. They're just cranking out pizzas. So how do they add to that experience? They make sure that those pizzas are coming out fresh and hot and on time, so that the staff member can go in and say, yeah, no worries. And the best thing that we could do is when they are sitting there and the parents go, man, that pizza looks good. Can I order another one? And it used to be when we didn't have the pizza ovens, we'd have to say, yeah, we can, but it's going to be 30 minutes because we got to get it delivered from Domino's. Now we just pop our head and say, hey, can you shove, how quickly can you get one out? And we come back and say, yeah, we'll have one out to you in 5 minutes, hot and fresh. And they're like, I had no idea you guys could do that. And it just adds to that experience. So anyway, any other comments or questions about some of the stuff that you've learned today, or we've talked to you about? Once again, we're not professional teachers, so it's a little bit different.
But all right. Well, I think, the underlying message I think that we wanted to sort of convey in terms of training is one, that there is a process to it. I think that, you have, you have to kind of, and that's something that you can't, as an operator, you need to think about your training process before you start, right? So that, when you're developing your plan or you're building your attraction or doing all those things, that you need to know what your process is. But the end goal is always the same, right? That you need to be able to do it, because that's what's good. That the people are the engine that drives your attraction, and the training you give them is going to be the fuel, let's say, in terms of, how they perform, right? So, you want to give them the very best opportunity to succeed in your operation, and that, is directly in line with how you train. So, make it a priority, make it, like, as Chuck said, I mean, some training doesn't pay off while you're doing it. It actually costs you. And so you have to see that as an investment in something down the road, right? That it's going to bring you, more, better revenue because you're busier, because people like your attraction, or you're getting better word of mouth, or that, like we mentioned before, about that efficiency of, the organization between, consumables, maintenance, all those kinds of things. They will all pay off. I can, give you examples of, where, somebody's mistake cost us thousands of dollars in a maintenance setting, where it's like, and was it a training issue or was it something else? and I'll give an example, just to close it out, where we had a technician, a water technician, whose job was to do water tests and backwash filters. And backwashing filters just basically means that the filter medium is clogged up with material that it's been filtering out of the water. And in order for it to work properly, then, on a regular basis, we basically reverse the flow through the filter and discharge out through the sanitary system. So not back into the pool. You can bypass that. So don't worry, we're not pushing it back into the pool. But that pushes the solids, because they can't pass through the filter medium, which is usually like some kind of sand, out of the filter, and makes the filter run better. Well, while you're doing that, you're discharging a lot of water. And so the technician opened the valve, and his training was supposed to be that when they open that valve, they stay with it until they close it. For whatever reason, he was busy, so he decided he was going to open it up. He knows it takes about 5 to 10 minutes for that process to work itself out. So he had enough time to go and do something else. Well, he went and did something else and got tied up with it. And by the time he came back, the pit so the water was discharging into a pit that had a pump that was, basically pumping it to sewage. Well, that pit overflowed, filled the motor well, and flooded all the motors for that attraction. And if you know anything about electric motors, they don't like working underwater. So they all failed. And there were 5 motors on that attraction. And the overall cost, because obviously we couldn't have that attraction down for like more than a day, which was bad enough to begin with, to overnight, to get somebody to deal with that overnight, to basically take the motors, dry them out, bake them, rewind them, all that stuff. The bill for the park there was $25,000. And that was all because somebody, basically was either not properly trained or failed to use their training. So when you look at the cost and investment of properly training that person, and you got to know that the following season, when we trained those technicians, that was a message that was properly reinforced, right? Because there was, maybe they knew the rule, but they didn't know why they had to do it. And now they knew the why. So, but that's an example of, it cost us a lot of money. And that was a big mistake.
Yeah, and that's why so much is invested in that training. If you extrapolate that, training 5 people, the investment is about $750. Now we do 15 hours of paid training. What would you do at Wet and Wild, Mike, or Wonderland? What do you think? It's usually about 5 hours per, so 5 to 10.
It depends on the position, but yeah, I would say 5 to 10 is average. I'd say on a ride operator or lifeguard, it could be more. I think a lifeguard is more like 30 hours.
Okay, so let's average it at 10 hours per person at $15 an hour. So it's $150 a person to train, and Wonderland is hiring 3,000 people. That's a huge investment, and because they're seasonal, they do it year after year and do the retraining and that sort of stuff. So it's a big amount of money that goes into making sure that it is done well to limit these $25,000 mistakes. So if you think that untrained people, those mistakes would be happening, weekly or daily, the investment is sound, right? Okay, so let's jump off of that and let's talk about the next assignment, which will be due the Wednesday that you come back. So
happy reading week, everybody.
Woohoo! So it's our gift to you. So we've learned as like good people should always learn from what's going on. You'll notice this template, I stole it from Kelly for this assignment, and we're going to have you guys put together a really small operating plan based on everything you've learned so far. So the scenario is that there's a family that owns a farm just outside of Toronto. They've got a really successful farm store where they're actually serving foods and produce and meats from their own farm and all the neighboring farms. They are an excellent client and an excellent attraction because they're helping a bunch of their community out. It's not a bad thing at all. But they've got a big clientele, and they've noticed that every fall everyone's heading north to see the fall colors. People are coming in, but they're kicking the tires. They're not doing anything. And it's a lot of families. So they've decided that they want to do a corn maze, but have no idea how to build the attraction and how to operationalize it. So they've hired you to do it. So we've added, compared to that first little quiz that we have added all sorts of details. So here's, so you're creating a plan. We're telling you what we want to see in terms of, the 5 different areas. This is important. It says, please note, you are not responsible for marketing and advertising of this new attraction. So stay out of I know marketing and advertising, social media, that's all the sexy stuff. We don't want to talk about all of that. I just want you to build out the plan, and let the marketing people bring them in. Your job is to create the plan that is going to get the word of mouth going that we talked about, build a plan that is going to make them money, and that sort of thing. Based on, and I'm not going to read it because you guys can read it. I'd like you to do the format. We'd like you to do it kind of like a simple plan format. So, and basically you're going to have these subheadings. You're going to do an overview. You're going to describe your concept. Then you're going to have your logistics heading. So parking, ticketing, all those things. And you're just going to quickly describe how you're going to do it. Your staff headings, right? Manager, ticket taker, parking attendant. And we want you to list the responsibilities of each of those positions. And then based on what we talked about today is, a little bit about how you're going to recruit and train all of these different positions. And then talk about your internal communication. So we're not talking communications as in how you get people to come in, but what's your setup so that the person from admissions can talk to the person from parking, or the person, if you've got someone in the maze who's supervising, how do they communicate back and forth? What's the flow in that sort of thing? And we're not going to do presentations. I think we'll just have them submitted. I also did a rubric. Now, I've got to tell you, coming from, I'm old school, coming from my background, in real life, there are no rubrics, right? Yes, you need to do the right thing all the time. But going through this lesson today, and as Mike and I were discussing, I realized that this isn't real life. This is kind of like training. So there should be a rubric in place so that you know what we're looking for, so that you can deliver and be better prepared for when you are out in the real world, to know what's kind of expected. So we wrote a rubric, and I don't. Do you guys have access to that? Can you? I haven't probably posted it yet, but I can. I've built it. I just think I've hidden it. But once I unhide it, let me see if I can do that while we're chatting. I'm going to stop sharing. Any questions so far as I'm going to the rubric?
Yeah, I just missed it. You had it at the top of the page there. How much is this one worth?
Oh, it's worth 20%.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we've got. So just we have 10% for your weekly participation. So those who are here all the time and are participating, adding to to our Padlets and are talking and interacting, are going to get the 10%, and then all the way down. People that are here all the time, maybe not participating, they'll get like an 8 or a 9, and then from there. There's 3 assignments. So that first one was worth 20. This one's worth 20. There's one more small one that's worth 20. And then there's also sort of the big final assignment, and that'll be worth 30. And we say big, it's all relative. We're not here to kill you with homework. That's not helping anybody.
What do we see? Word limit from Knock.
Yeah, I saw.
I don't think we established a word limit. I think what we're looking for is you don't need to build us the most complex corn maze attraction that the world has ever seen. I mean, corn mazes are small. They're think like local farm attractions. So, but what we want to see is opposed to we don't need paragraphs upon paragraphs. What we want to see is that you have a sort of you've thought out the plan, that you've used the information that we've covered through the course so far in terms of just showing your understanding of where that would be involved. And, you know, example would be like, you're going to say, well, we're going to have training. Well, I don't need to see your training, you know, manual or anything else like that. You can make reference to that, or, you know, what kinds of things that you're doing. So what are your considerations? Yeah, here's the rubric, right? So just, you know, give us a thought that you've kind of thought through all the bits, you know, like that there's going to be, you know, I'm going to need to do this, or who, you know, this is going to happen. So how am I going to plan out that kind of thing? So, you know, just, you know, don't get lost in the weeds of it. Kind of think of it as very high level sort of concept kind of thing. So
yeah, and the other thing is how much reading are the owners and the staff you're hiring going to want to do before they lose their attention. Right. So if you're building this out as the plan here, you know, you don't want to be adding additional words that don't need to be there. So it's just, you know, here's the staffing plan. We're going to do boom, 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 boom. And then you want to say, and then because it is an assignment, you might want to give a sentence or two as to why you did it that way, if that makes sense. So, you know, we talk about here, so there will be five things we'll be looking for. So the concept, and you can get and we're going to score this out of 20. So, you know, the core and maze concept clearly defines operational considerations such as the throughput, the hang time, safety, ease of access, endpoint, all of those sort of things. So you're looking at, you know, you know, how it's going to work. And then it goes down from there. So it doesn't clearly defines it, but it defines it, and we can understand where you're trying to get to. You've sort of touched upon a plan, but it might not be logical, or, you know, we see some glitches in how it's done, and you get a 1 is if the concept is you didn't build a corn maze. You know what I mean, or something like that.
There's no corn in your corn maze.
That's right, or something. Then we're going to talk about, you know, the logistics, and this is interesting because we've talked a lot about the difference between a big attraction and a small attraction, in that the small attractions, they still need to have the same amount of departments, but it's usually just one person who's in charge of it. So the plan clearly outlines most of the operational considerations to ensure, you know, a safe, enjoyable, hassle-free visit from the time they enter until the time they leave. And you'll notice we go back to the Word document, we've sort of even given some hints as to what some of those things you should be looking at, like parking and admissions, and, you know, is there and logistics and retail and that sort of thing. So then we have most, we have some, we have a few of them, a few of the major considerations will get you a 2. And then if you forgot about there's no plan for how you're going to get someone from the road through the attraction. Are we good so far? And hopefully good. And hopefully you're going to find this it's going to be easier for you to complete the assignment, because we're really laying it out for you a little bit better than we did that first one, which you all did very well on, by the way. And thank you for that. So based on your concept and your logistics, the plan identifies all of the staff positions. Now, and I'm not saying you're not, you know, the staff type positions. So if you have parking attendants, you might have 5 of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them, but that's one position. If you have ticket takers, you might have 2 or 3 of them, but that's one position. So you're going to describe the position, and they're going to match your plan, right? And then list out the responsibilities based on how you see your plan working. And so once again, so if you've got it all laid out, and and I can go, yep, they said that they're going to have a parking attendant, and here's how parking is going to work. And you said, okay, I've got 2 parking attendants, and they are responsible for guiding. One's going to do this, one's going to do that. Here's the responsibility, and they're going to make sure that when people get out of their cars, they get directed to the right place, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and remember that the scale of the attraction, right? This is a corn maze, so, you know, you don't need to have a, you know, chief engineer and somebody who's, the CEO of Corn Maze, that's the farmer, those kinds of things. So, you're not building Wonderland here, right?
Yeah, it's yeah, exactly. It's one little attraction in an already established business. So that's why we did it. And then hopefully your mind's already going about some of the cool things you're going to be able to do to make this work. It's meant to be.
Or if during your reading week you want to enjoy a lovely fall day and go visit a local attraction,
there's lots of
attraction. There's lots to visit.
There are lots
that will give you some inspiration.
And
you might get a pie out of it.
That's true. I'm going up to one this weekend. That was actually the inspiration for me putting the scenario together, because I'm like, oh man, because they have a fantastic farm store, and they built a maze this week or this year. And so then same thing all the way down. So, and then recruitment and training. So how are you gonna? Oh, there we go. How are we going to do the recruitment and training plan? So once again, it can be listed out kind of like today's presentation. I'm going to do one-on-one interviews, and here's I'm going to go on Indeed. I'm going to do one-on-one interviews. We're going to do an orientation, and we're going to have a night where it's family and friends, and we're going to do a dry run to train the staff in a safe and non-judgmental environment. It's kind of like when Wonderland does. Yeah, I think Wonderland does those the park buyouts early in the season where the banks used to do it, and I think that part of that was some live training.
It was a training day.
It was a training day in a controlled environment. Anyway.
Yeah, when they do their Halloween haunt or their Christmas, they also have a night that's called the IDR, the interactive dress rehearsal, and they invite family and friends and stuff like that. And they basically, everybody knows that it's a dress rehearsal, right? So some things may, the programming may just stop all of a sudden because someone's like, whoa, let's redo this, and everybody in the audience knows that may happen, but it's training.
Yeah. And then the same thing, communication. So what are your procedures to make sure that everyone knows what's going on? Are you doing a team? Are you going to do a team meeting before it opens all the time, so that you get them all excited and make sure that everyone's, if one person has a question that's comfortable enough to ask it, that 3 or 4 other staff probably have the same question but are too shy to ask. So that could be part of it. Do you have walkie-talkies? Are you doing via text? All sorts of different things. You figure out based on your plan what you can do. So I would, you talk about word counts and stuff. I don't see this being more than a couple pages long, really, and maybe with some diagrams if you want to do a dot map, which I think would be really cool. I think you could probably have some fun with a dot map. Just make up what your property looks like, and whenever you think of farm property, you think of a long laneway that leads into a parking area, and then you put where the store is and figure that all out. But like I said, this is it's not meant to scare you. It's not meant to stress you out or take up all of your week off time. It should hopefully get your creative juices flowing and put go, oh man, I know how to do this. I can do this now because of all the stuff we've learned so far. I'm going to stop sharing. Are any questions on this? Is this pretty clear? It's certainly better than you got with your first assignment with us. Okay.
So
right.
Have some fun with it. Like I said, we're not as concerned with the sort of volume of information that we get from you guys. Moreover, just the ability for you to sort of apply these sort of concepts and show us some, that you're sort of thinking through these things. It's all about, all right, well, do you have you sort of considered this in your plan? And that, might, if you mention something that is for example, an operations plan in there that, or your training plan, we don't need to know exactly all the bits that are going to happen, just that you're going to do it and all that kind of stuff. So, don't get too far, because you can kind of go down the rabbit hole, about how to build a corn maze. And we don't need to know the mechanics of that, right? We want you to just sort of think about sort of, if you were going to do it, and some farmer, and it's very, this is very small rural attraction. It doesn't have a massive budget. They just want to sell some extra, baked goods and pumpkins, so, and it needs to be sort of fun, sort of just, low key, and, just keep that as your guide.
Yeah. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It is. And once again, you don't know what you don't know. So you might, and during this whole process, if you end up coming up against a roadblock in your head and go, man, like, how would I do this? Reach out to us and ask those questions, because let me tell you, some of the best attractions are built because of asking someone who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
We call it R&D, which is rob and duplicate. Right. Like, and there's nothing wrong with that, because best practice is best practice. And so you've got two people right here who have dealt, I've never built a corn maze, but I can tell you that I could probably put together a kick butt plan to make sure that it was going to make a lot of money and keep people entertained and be busier than all get out. I sometimes need to reel that in when I'm at Central Counties. I go and meet some of our stakeholders. I was at there's a fantastic and Mike, stop me if I've told this story at this class, because once again I never can remember. There's a fantastic cidery in just north of Acton called Heartwood Farms and Cidery. And the first time I went there, I'm looking at this operation. They do maple syrup, and I brought Patch, who at the time was probably 9 or 10. And the guy took him and took him out and showed him the whole thing and showed the different, all this thing. While I'm talking with the wife about the operation, the cidery. They've got an organic farm, and in my head it's already going. I'm like, man, okay. So I drove down this really long driveway, but there was a field right at the road. I said, if you plowed that field and gravelled it, you could get buses in there and cars and like you could be making a fortune here. And I was telling her this, because my mind is just going about all these things you could do to programming and expansion. And she's like, she said, Chuck, just stop right there. That's not what we want. That is not who we are. She said, success to us is if we have 6 to 10 people on the property at a time throughout the day, because we want to provide these intimate experiences, and we want to get to know the people that are coming and have them leave knowing more than they knew when they arrived. And it made me stop and have to rethink how I could help, right? Because that's not who I am. Like, Glow Zone it's cheap and cheerful. You want to look at a brand, cheap and cheerful. People know there is value in what they're doing, and we are reliant on throughput and the quantity of people we put through in a year. We're putting through each of these locations puts through 100,000 people a year, which for 15,000 square feet that's a lot. But that's my mindset. It's about, let's get everyone, let's make it accessible from a price standpoint so that everyone can come and enjoy it. But that's not what she wanted. She wanted to do something a lot more intimate. And I said to her, I said, that is a premium experience. People will pay money to do that because it is exclusive. And I said, and you're underselling your own value. If you're taking an hour or two with each of these groups and you're not charging them to do it, because at that time it was all free, and the money they would get is if they bought some maple syrup and some ciders. I said, no, I said, your time is worth money. Your knowledge is worth money. The experience they're getting because of you is worth money. So she started to put together where you could buy a time to come to the farm and buy the experiences. And I still think she's underpricing herself, but she just can't understand the value people would be willing to pay to do that, especially in this time in these circumstances where everything was basically closed, but she could stay open, and because it was outdoors, people had more money than they knew what to do with. And she was charging, you know, $10 a head. And I'm like, you should be charging like $40 or $50 a head. But she just, you know, she wasn't there yet. So anyway, so that's
But
so
she
when
got
you're-
them to pick apples, which saved them on labor cost, right? So.
that's exactly right. They did all their own side. Anyway, so
all right.
So any questions or comments before we end 10 minutes early today about the assignment? Oh, yeah, I published them. So I have no idea what you do once you publish them. Shouldn't you be able to see them? I have no idea how that works.
Oh, I mean, I checked all the different ways that, like, where they could have possibly have gone, and I can't find them.
It's probably just us learning the system. So we will address that then and ask our connections at Durham College on what we did wrong. But yeah, we certainly did publish them, and we were, Chuck and I were resting easy thinking that you guys had them, but apparently you don't. So we'll make sure that gets corrected.
Okay.
Huh. All right. We'll do some digging and get them there. What I can do is, I'll see if I can figure that out. And if I can't figure it out quickly, what I'll do is I'll just send an individual email to each of you to let you know what your mark was and some of the feedback from that first quiz. Does that sound reasonable? Perfect. Okay. All right.
All right. Well, I think on that note, enjoy your reading week. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. Once again, it's been a pleasure.